This afternoon at Blockchain Week, we're joined by a group of leading KYC, AML, and scam specialists. Our moderator, John Bassilios, is a partner at Hall & Wilcox, as well as a Blockchain Australia board member. John will lead off and introduce his fellow specialists. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Amy. Yes, hi everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. As Amy mentioned, I'm a partner at Hall & Wilcox Lawyers. I sit in the financial services team, and I lead our blockchain group. I might start off to getting everyone to do a quick intro of themselves and talk a little bit about their organisation. Start off with you, Simon.
Yeah, super. Hi everyone, my name is Simon Costello. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of FrankieOne. We're an aggregator in the identity and fraud space. As we know, there's many different tools. This session, obviously, we're going to talk to a number of those. What Frankie does is we integrate, and we have done with over 350 different third-party vendors and data sources, and we bring them together into a single system, offering a single unified API. Great,
thank you. Louisa.
Thanks, John. I'm Louisa Xu from New Payments Platform Australia. I'm a senior legal counsel there. Our platform has the capabilities to do real-time clearing and settling of payments across Australia. So it's a domestic payments rail. Previous to that, I was a lawyer at Piper Alderman advising blockchain and fintech projects. And I'm also a co-chair of Blockchain Australia Young Professionals, where we drive conversations with emerging blockchain leaders in the space.
Thank you, Louisa. Todd?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining everyone. And John, good to see you again. I'm the country manager for Chainalysis, and we are a compliance investigation solution working across cryptocurrency.
Thank you. Keith.
Good afternoon, John. Keith Organ, I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Mind Digital. I'm based in Sydney. Our head office is based in Brisbane. We are a digital currency exchange. I won't talk too much. We're going to a bit of a rebrand and a bit of a relaunch tomorrow. I know our CEO, Grant, will discuss a bit of his speech tomorrow, so I won't say too much, but thanks for the invite to the panel. I'm looking forward to speaking.
Thanks, Keith. Tung?
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So I'm Tung Lim. I'm from Elliptic. We are a crypto intelligence company that provides blockchain analytics solutions to companies, financial institutions and regulators to ensure that all their AML CFT obligations or regulatory monitoring of all these issues are being done properly.
Thanks, Tung. Chloe, thanks for joining us. We're just going around doing quick intros. If you just tell us where you're from and what your organisation does, and then we'll get stuck into it. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Chloe. I'm the head of compliance of Binance Australia. So we're the brand under Binance.com, and then we're operating in Australia right here. We offer spot trading to the Australian customers, and then there's going to be more products and service available later this year. So please stay tuned.
Great. Thank you, Chloe. Jackson, we're just doing a really quick intro of ourselves. So if you could give us a bit of an intro of yourself and your organisation. Thanks. You're on mute.
Thanks, John. So I'm Jackson Zeng from Caleb & Brown. We're a full-service brokerage based in Melbourne. We simply aggregate assets across OTC desks, centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges, and provide a one-on-one service to our clients.
Great, thank you very much, Jackson. So we might get stuck into it. I'll start off again with you, Simon. I know that you're doing a lot of work for many of the exchanges here in Australia in terms of KYC, AML. What sort of mistakes are you seeing a lot of the exchanges getting involved in?
Yeah, super. I suppose from our vantage point, we see a number of different exchanges, both local and international. And Australia has some unique regulatory requirements in Australia. And sometimes it's very difficult as an international organization, which most crypto exchanges are. And what we're seeing is there a number of international crypto exchanges, the way they view or they read the ASIC, the AUSTRAC regulations is that it would be sufficient to be utilizing the biometrics photo to onboard. And so, which is very common, and in Europe, potentially in the States, taking the photo and using providers, whether it be Onfidos, Jumios, SumSub, etc., is sufficient to onboard a customer. But in Australia, it's a little bit different from a regulation requirements perspective. That Australia's regulation actually see that it's more of a fraud tool than it is a onboarding or KYC AML tool. In addition, you need what they call safe harbor requirements. And so it's a very important point, as some of the largest fines in corporate history in Australia are actually on this point. And you do actually need to do 2 independent data source checks to onboard to be able to, for a crypto exchange. And so that's certainly probably, if you're looking at one of the, I suppose, mistakes that some people in their interpretation perspective, that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. So to boil it down, I think what you're saying is that the obligation is to verify the information that they have given you in respect of their identity, rather than things like photos and whatnot, against independent sources.
Exactly right. The photo does a great job from a fraud perspective, making sure the person that is onboarding, but it needs to be independently verified, as you correctly stated, with local sources here in Australia.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Louisa, can you maybe just tell us a little bit about NPP and the relevance of NPP to crypto and crypto exchanges?
Yeah, sure. So our payment network, we have a lot of digital currency exchanges that are connected through, say, an identified institution or one of the other providers of financial services or aggregators in Australia to provide that on and off ramp to fiat currency. So they would have their own AML CTF requirements themselves as a digital currency exchange, but there's always that requirement and that need to connect in with existing financial institutions and existing payment rails in Australia.
Excellent, thank you. Todd, I might move across to you. Can you tell us a little bit about what Chainalysis is seeing in the money laundering space in crypto?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think probably to set the scene, it's really important to understand the growth in the crypto ecosystem. I mean, we saw something like $15.8 trillion in total value transfer during last year, up some 567%. Now, that's a huge increase of the total overall market. And we only saw about 79% increase in actual illicit activity. So we're seeing more and more genuine activity on chain, and it's not associated with that illicit activity, which I think is one of the key things. In saying that, we have seen an increase in the actual, I suppose, value of crime that's happened on chain, and that's just relative to the actual, participants in the market. We've seen probably a bit of a shift, probably something around 30% in money laundering in the last year. And I mean, that's obviously participation, but it's also changed in the way that the money laundering is happening. It's moving away from our centralized exchanges. So, they're obviously doing something right, and it's moving into the newer trending areas like DeFi. So DeFi's had a massive increase in illicit activity. Some, over 1,900% increase has shifted towards DeFi over the last 12 months.
Just on that, can you maybe, I know that Chainalysis does this research. What sort of percentage are we talking about in the crypto space is even relevant to be fraudulent or scams? I know that you do that research. So can you give us a sense of not just the quantum, but also the percentage?
Yeah, so from a perspective, I mean, in the last report we had was 0.15% was illicit activity, which was down from 0.62 last year. We previously advertised 0.34, but obviously with the attribution process that Chainalysis participates in on a daily basis, that number increased as we identified more and more sources. I mean, we saw things like sewers, third ox, and those types of things in play, and that obviously accounted for quite a bit of that activity in regards to the actual funding, but from a percentage-wise, a little bit smaller once again.
Yeah, so incredibly small. Tung, is that something that you could speak to in terms of Elliptic's experience as to what sort of percentage falls into that category?
Yes, thanks, John. Yeah, I think our numbers is largely the same as Chainalysis. So, for example, in the last year alone, we see that in terms of the illicit proceeds, from various kind of crimes, using crypto, that's less than 1%. And then, if you speak specifically about the DeFi space, we for last year we estimated that DeFi users alone lost more than like $10 billion in terms of hacks, thefts, and other cyber crimes that occurred on DeFi platforms. And of course, that's due to a variety of reasons, because DeFi has higher liquidity, there are more interest in that area, and then of course sometimes the code, there can be exploits, code exploits, and so on, or economic exploits that actually enable such crimes to occur potentially more easily on certain DeFi platforms. And then of course, if you look at the overall picture, I think Elliptic estimates that less than 40% of illicit proceeds as a whole is attributable to scams, Ponzi schemes, or similar nature crimes of such crimes.
Thank you. So I think that's really helpful in framing the conversation, that we need to understand that what we're talking about is a very small percentage of the overall sort of transaction volume and value. But bearing that framing in mind, Jackson, I think you have some thoughts about scams and malicious intent and the need to be able to identify the different categories of risks and risks mitigants. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about that and your experience with that?
Yeah, it's really important to differentiate this. What we want to be clear about is that scams is malicious intent. It's not an outcome that didn't meet the investor's expectations, right? And in understanding that, only from there can we move forward, because crypto is a space of very high consumer education requirements, and investors have different risk tolerances for different categories of risks. We need to educate consumers on the type of risk. If it is an opportunistic scam, that's an investment opportunity where the person producing the product is not actually selling you what they're advertising. However, it's commonly misconstrued. Scams are often misconstrued with exploits, which is a risk in smart contract. So as an investor, you want to be able to understand the things that you're investing in. Is it a opportunistic scam, which is a high likelihood of a scam, or it's basically 100% likelihood of being a scam if you properly identify it? Or is it an exploit risk where you're still purchasing the asset that you've been marketed? However, you can look for mitigants, which is, has this smart contract been audited by reputable players in the space? And a service like Caleb & Brown seeks to speak individually with every investor so that they can understand for every asset that they're investing in, what are the exposures that they have.
Okay, thanks, Jackson. Chloe, I might speak to you now and revert back to sort of the KYC discussion. I know that you have some thoughts about learnings that we can learn, I guess, from other international counterparts. Could you maybe share your thoughts with us on that?
Yes, certainly. So we have seen like individuals and business, they have to provide similar KYC document to each platform they want to use. And sometimes this document contain personal information, maybe saved in a local computer or emails. Once those are compromised, like those documents may be used for illicit purpose. So what we have seen like in a global wise, like especially like, for example, the MyInfo in Singapore is kind of like a government mentioned platform which stores personal information collected from different public agencies, and users provide consent to share their personal data, and the MyInfo system also fills those forms with informations and compile from various government agencies. So the document verification is not really required at the moment, since the account authenticates the user's identity using government data. So to our points, like a KYC process are supposed to fulfill our AML obligation while considering the user experience. So I believe this method is in the right direction. So right now in Australia, we already have the DVS system, which allows the authorized entities to electronically verify ID documents. So what we need to do is like take one step further to develop this system from a passive system into a proactive one, where individual or business have a better oversight over their personal information. And at the same time, you will give comfort to the regulators and also make business KYC process more smoothly.
Great, thank you. I mean, I guess in a similar vein, Keith, I think you have some thoughts about the KYC AML process and I guess the user experience and how to produce the best outcome for users. If you wanted to speak to us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of similar to what Jackson was talking about as well. I think that the key thing is that it can be a frustration for some customers, particularly when they're signing up to the exchange and having to provide documents and wondering why they have to do that. And it's just really making that process as smooth as seamless as possible. And we use a number of different tools at Mind Digital to enable that to happen. And I think that's really the key thing, because everybody knows it, and unfortunately, there's as everyone has discussed here, there's a lot of scams, and there can be a lot of creative people in the industry and trying to make life difficult for all of us here who are trying to do a great job and to grow the space. And what we're really trying to do is let people know that this is why we're doing this, why we have the KYC and AML process, because it's really to ensure that we're protecting everything that the clients have, and to ensure that they don't have a bad experience. No one wants to. Everyone has a horror story. Unfortunately, in this industry, I know a lot of people here outside of the call, and we all have conversations, outside of this, and we have bad stories. And thankfully, they're getting less and less as we're growing, as we're educating and implementing better tools and better processes. So I think it's really the key thing and it's the education part to our clients and customers as well, where we're keeping them abreast of scams that are happening, and we know that things have happened to other people, and really just doing that, but trying to keep the user experience, the customer experience, and really just getting that point across that the reason why we're doing it is just to make it safe as possible. This is really what's key.
Okay, thank you. I guess staying on that theme of the customer experience and onboarding, Simon, I think you have some thoughts that you'd like to share with us in relation to sort of balancing the risk of compliance and delivering a good user experience.
Yeah, it's actually just picking up what Keith mentioned. As Keith mentioned, he uses many different tools to combat against both the onboarding piece, let's call that the KYC AML, but also the ongoing sort of piece from a fraud, which can happen at day one, but also sort of ongoing. What we're seeing in the industry is, let's call it, the old way was the one-size-fits-all way of onboarding. In Australia, that was the 100 points of ID. Every single person goes through a very rigorous level of checks, which compromise that customer experience. And let's call it not an ideal sort of situation. Where we're seeing the industry move towards is dynamic and risk-based onboarding. Now, what a lot of people are familiar with is risk-based credit, but maybe not so much on the risk-based onboarding. And this is the trend, I suppose, that we're seeing in the industry. And so the best of breed are actually having different flows for a low-risk customer, maybe making a spot trade of a low volume, whereas someone making a larger whale, or someone using credit products inside crypto, this will be a different risk profile, and hence have a different level of checks and balances need to be taking place. This is dynamic, and it happens obviously in real time, depending on different inputs and different factors. And this allows the splitting the traffic and having different flows to hopefully being a much more right-sized approach to what level of checks and then who they need to apply to. And it's always it's a great balance, right? Because you can, Austrac is very particular about their high, medium and low risk customers. And if you can demonstrate that in an automated fashion, it's extremely powerful for the regulator, but also from a customer experience. And it's a lovely blend, which normally is a compromise. It's either compliance and as tight as you possibly can be from a fraud, but also a poor customer experience. And now what we're seeing is not necessarily such major trade-offs.
Thank you. This might sound a little bit tangential, but I might go to Louisa and get you to speak to us about debanking, because that is actually relevant to sort of KYC and AML. If you could maybe share some of your thoughts with us about that.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it goes to Simon's point around the risk-based approach. So you have the risk-based approach from a digital currency exchange point of view, but also from a financial institution point of view, and managing their risks rather than saying no to blockchain or crypto projects because it doesn't fit within a nice framework that they've had for a while, that they should look at it from a risk risk-based approach and consider, look, how do you manage projects and companies that are coming on board that don't look like a traditional company or a traditional offering, and how do you manage that risk rather than saying no to that industry completely. Austrac has come out and said, look, you shouldn't be debanking an entire industry like that. There's a lot of negativity from that, and you lose out on a lot of jobs and opportunities. But to rethink and go, what is the risk-based approach, and reviewing your AML CTF programs and saying, where can you make provisions for higher risk companies or projects.
Okay, thank you. Chloe, I think you have some comments that you wanted to share with us about education of users in relation to scams and working closely with law enforcement.
Yeah, certainly. Like as many people already mentioned, when it comes to scams, the most effective way is to prevent them from happening at the first place. A lot of users are new to crypto and blockchain, so it's very important to educate them and raise awareness of a scam. So Binance Australia will publish a set of blogs detailing like commonly seen scams and how to spot them. And recently, we're also preparing a new scam awareness campaign. Will be more interactive and use real examples we have identified recently. So, however, the most important part is still the users themselves. As always say in the crypto world, DYOR means like do your own research. So if something is too good to be true, that normally means it's not true. So if in the unfortunate event scam happened, so working closely with law enforcement become a priority. The relationship between exchanges and law enforcement used to be exchanges will respond to the law enforcement request, and which is pretty one-sided. But we all have the common goal here. We're trying to protect user and fighting scams. So as a matter of fact, we're being informed that most of the exchanges, the response speed is much faster from some of the traditional financial institutions. So recently, we also started this initiative where exchanges and law enforcement can sit together and so frequently ask questions from both sides and discuss how we may work together better.
Well, thank you. Well, continuing on with that theme, Tung, I think you've got some comments that you'd like to share with us in relation to an increased regulatory focus on consumer protection and scrutiny over misconduct occurring in crypto markets.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, John. I actually completely agree with Chloe. So in my previous life before Elliptic, I was in various law enforcement agencies in Singapore, like Monetary Authority of Singapore, the Singapore Police Force, and so on. So definitely the increased focus on fraud prevention and consumer protection is definitely something I can see and relate to. And indeed, in my role as the Senior Policy Advisor for the APAC region, I can see that there's really a lot of movement towards this area. So instead of just focusing on AML CFT regulations, I think regulators are looking increasingly to, of course, at one hand, provide consumer education, but on the other hand, thinking of taking more regulatory steps to go into the industry and stop certain kind of activities from happening. So, for example, last year, what do Kim Kardashian, the boxer, Mayweather, or the Fairs Clan, which is a popular esports team, has in common? They're all actually social media influencers that got into trouble because they were promoting altcoins. So last year, for example, in Thailand, the Thai authorities actually banned the trading of such meme coins and NFTs by crypto asset exchanges. And if the industry does not take its own stance, to make sure and make clear that they do not want their consumers to be affected, I think there will be increased regulatory scrutiny over this area. And I think this is not something this will be something that potentially might stifle innovation and so on. I think we're beginning to see a bit of that, a glimpse of that. So for example, in January, MES, back in Singapore, they actually issued guidelines that prohibit the promotion of crypto assets to the general public because they are concerned that crypto asset trading may have been portrayed in a manner that trivializes the risks. And then, of course, even in Australia, just in the last couple of weeks, like the ACCC initiated court proceedings against Meta for misleading crypto-related advertisements on this platform, and even ASIC also recently issued an information sheet 269 for social media influencers and the licensees who use them. So I think all these are very clear. Regulatory authorities will take on an increasingly important role in the oversight of the crypto asset industry and seeking to clarify standards to protect consumers from fraud and potential market misconduct.
Thank you. Louisa, I might pass on to you to talk to us a little bit about, frauds and scams in the context of the law, and I guess the recent case against Meta by the ACCC, and what this means for blockchain platforms.
Yeah, as Tung mentioned, it's a really interesting case that was brought by the ACCC, given ScamWatch had issued the amounts that were attributed to scams related to impersonation of celebrities and whatnot. So last year, the report that had 2020 figures had about 1.5 million that were attributed to impersonations. This year, when they brought this action against Meta, they said there was one case where that in itself was $600,000. So you can tell that there is an increase in this area, but as a percentage of the overall scams, it's actually not that much. My guess is it's because it's quite hard from a legal perspective to chase the bad actors in a certain market, whether it's in crypto, whether it's in financial market space. So what they're going after is the misleading and deceptive conduct by the platforms and by Meta, and them having those ads on their platform and them not taking those down. So yeah, it would be really interesting to see what obligations that Meta do have, and whether they'll stand up in court to say that they had an obligation to manage these ads on their platform. I think it's really good for the industry though, because it's the regulators stepping in the crypto and blockchain industry to say, look, we're cleaning out those bad actors and ensuring that the legitimate businesses and those that are out there are front and center rather than the bad actors.
Okay, great, thank you. Todd, that's probably a good segue to you to maybe talk to us a little bit about what Elliptic is seeing in the scam space.
Chainalysis.
Sorry, Chainalysis. My apologies.
Yeah, so I mean, the scam space has increased. We've seen like about an 81% increase over the last 12 months to over $7 billion. But I think we also saw an article in the media earlier this year, and rug pulls was the go-to, and that's where the sort of I suppose a large majority of what we were seeing happen. Something like $2.8 billion was associated to rug pulls, and this is as Chloe said, do your own research. This is some of that get rich quick component that we're seeing in the market. And I mean, I'm not a financial advisor, but diversification of assets is something that I've always been spoken to and about. And putting all your eggs in one basket can end in some trouble. We saw Finico netted 1.1 billion in regards to scams. So it really is, yes, it's prevalent there, but people also need to be responsible for some of their own actions. Yes, we do need regulators involved in this space, but there's multiple parties, and I mean you can protect people from themselves only for so long. And I think it's just one of those things that it is a two-way street, and we do need to all work together in the community to help solve some of these issues that we're dealing with.
Thank you. That's probably a good lead into you, Keith, about to talk to us a little bit about security and sort of customer education.
Absolutely, and I'm probably repeating the same points that everyone has, and Chloe and Todd have just said. Really, it is that, as you said, Chloe, if it seems too good to be true, it always is, not usually is. And even as you're seeing the ads in there, I know a number of high-profile celebrities, and Andrew Forrest was one who took Facebook to court as well. And there've been a number of ones where people using their image without and saying that these various get-rich-quick schemes. And I think it is that at Mind Digital, we certainly do educate our customers, and we do have that. We do reach out to be able to educate them about that. But it really is that down to a little bit of doing your research and being able to, as I said, just if it seems too good to be true, it really always is. And just being able to, I think just have that kind of common sense approach. But it really, if it's going to be, if you're expecting huge returns on something, or you're seeing celebrity endorsements, or you're not doing your own research, then that's really the key thing to get across. As everyone has said, we're just kind of talking about the same points again, really. But it's that really.
I guess similarly, Jackson, what sort of thoughts did you have on sort of customer and consumer education in this space?
Yeah, I think there's really two tiers that the customers are exposed to. At the centralized exchange level, the customer actually gets the assistance of the centralized service provider because they too want to mitigate the risk on their platforms. It's once you enter DeFi and the trustless space, that's when you really need to level up your own education of the risks. So I think it's a very good idea what Treasury is currently doing, which is looking at regulating and putting in a licensing regime for secondary service providers, because that way beginners as a consumer have a place to go for a mark of legitimacy and know that if I use this category of provider, there's assistance there on risk mitigation. And then there are also different types of service providers. You can go on digital platforms, which service mass market. And there's also smaller firms like ours that focus on a one-on-one relationship, and you're able to ask a question with your relationship manager, and any type of concerns or misunderstandings that you might have would get immediately cleared up. And then we also focus on educating the customers on their operational security and showing them that, okay, once you enter this decentralized space, it's a fast-moving environment. The opportunities are exciting, but there's a lot to learn. And that way it's a exciting space. And it's also a space that works very collaboratively. We see that now with fantastic products like Chainalysis, service providers like ourselves, like Mind Digital, like Binance, we're able to stop illicit funds in their tracks the moment it hits our platforms because they've already been flagged.
Great, thank you. Tung, I think you had some comments that you wanted to share with us in relation to traditional finance and what we can learn from the regulatory signposts that we see in traditional finance in the crypto space.
Yes, thanks, John. So I think that there are very innovative use cases in, of course, crypto. Things like stable coins, DeFi, and so on. And I think one interesting point is that globally, I think regulators are taking a position of basically same risk, same controls, or same rules. So what they see is that a lot of these DeFi players, for example, or even in crypto, they are trying to emulate traditional financial services. So, for example, stable coins can be seen as a form of currency, since it's often backed by assets such as US dollars and so on. So I think increasingly the regulators are beginning to see that because DeFi proponents often say that DeFi is completely decentralized. They cannot be regulated, for example. But that's not really true, because there are certain DeFi protocols or platforms that actually have a form of a central component. And in the updated FATF guidance from October last year, FATF themselves said that individuals or stakeholders who potentially exert control or some level of influence can be considered as VESP to be regulated as well. So I think this is where the regulators will start to scrutinize more of this space, whether this DeFi platform is actually decentralized or there are certain components that should be legislated or regulated as VESPs. And I think this is actually a positive movement for the whole crypto industry, because as these there's definitely a convergence between traditional financial services as well as the crypto space. And the more convergence there is, the more mainstream the adoption and the more trust that we can generate among consumers and so on. So I think this is definitely a good development for the whole industry as well, especially if you use blockchain analytics programs, solutions to ensure that all the risks are being mitigated as much as possible. So I think this is overall quite a positive development for the industry as well.
Great, thank you. Chloe, I might pass on to you if you could maybe share with us some thoughts about the travel rule and its implementation in some other jurisdictions and what Australia might learn from those other jurisdictions.
Yes, certainly. So exchanges, we're monitoring all fronts, like a KYC, AUD, cryptos, while we have some excellent complaint like a Chainalysis, Elliptic to help us to monitoring the crypto transactions. The heated question is always how travel rule requirements are and how this may be implemented in AU. I know we have another panel discussing this a topic specifically, so I just slightly touch this on how they're gonna affect from the AML side. So for any wallet hosting companies, there will need to be some form of information exchange but the extent of like information sharing and how the practical consideration we need to put into this AML and CTF operations better come from the business first rather than the top-down regulatory requirement directly. So I think there's no better time than right now to start the conversation within the industry to given that the new initiative proposed by the government this Monday. So organizations like Blockchain Australia will be a great platform for us to form the working group and start working on it. Experience and the knowledges we learn from other regions will definitely benefit the Australian proposals.
Okay, thank you. I guess relevant to that is the extent to which money laundering in crypto compares to fiat, and I might pass on to Todd to speak to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's something important, and obviously with the travel rule, we're looking at numbers of transfers and those sorts of things. So as you said, it's a conversation that's going to happen a little bit later. But I suppose from the traditional fiat side, I mean, we saw. I've been looking for this number for quite some time, and we published it, which was really good. Or we published the version of it. UNODC advising that from the money laundering perspective, there's something or an estimate of between 800 million and $2 trillion in value, which is being obviously from that fiat part of the world, which accounts to about 5% of GDP. From a crypto perspective, it's much smaller. It's 0.05% of GDP, which is associated to money laundering. Now, I'm not saying that crypto is the best. I mean, I am in a way, but we're just sort of saying that the transfer of value, attracts people from a criminal aspect, and so we just have the inherent ability through the transparency of blockchain to see what's going on in the space, and I think that's something that we need to highlight and continue to highlight that. The visibility that we're providing is shining a light on that type of illicit activity where, there's estimates being made in fiat. We can see what's happening. We can show the world what's happening. And I think that's really key to bringing on law enforcement businesses and providing confidence in the new institutions that are coming into this space.
Thank you. In a similar vein, I think, Jackson, you had some comments you wanted to share with us about having a transparent ledger.
Yeah, I'm just taking a common sense approach to this. If you imagine that or let's say I'm a scammer, I've got funds from illicit proceeds. Why on earth would you want to transact with a public ledger that everyone can see? On top of that, there's really fantastic services that the RegTech companies like we have on this panel that are building that make every other secondary service provider immediately know when you put those funds on their platform. And then now it's immediately attributable to your identity. And these secondary service providers, when they fall into licensing regimes, they're going to report that to the relevant regulator. And that's going to be possibly where you live if you're the scammer. So it's just not a good idea to use a public ledger if you're a scammer. So I think the narrative needs to change. I think we should really talk about the benefits of minimizing illicit activity using transparent ledgers.
Thank you. Louisa, I might pass on to you just to talk to us about how blockchain projects can offer solutions that bridge the gap between regulatory requirements and how blockchain fits into all of that.
Yeah, I think I echo the sentiment of the panelists around, you've got this amazing technology that's trying to solve problems that we've had in the financial services industry for a while. And like Jackson said, blockchain is really Twitter for your financial transactions, right? You're telling everyone what you're purchasing and which public addresses that you're sending money to. So you've got this really unique situation where you're trying to resolve your requirements around AML, CTF, but you've also got this amazing technology that's able to provide immutable information that's transparent and it's secure. Like you can trust in the accuracy of the information that's being passed from one party to another. So there's definitely the convergence between that traditional space and the financial requirements that are currently in place and what sort of amazing solutions that our industry can come up with. So for example, you know, you have KYC where you might not need to provide exactly the date of birth of a person, but it's a yes, no. Is this person over a certain age? And you're able to provide the privacy that someone might need in relation to their data, but it's in a way that data is, someone can rely on that and know that it is accurate and it hasn't been tampered with, and to have those solutions and to talk about what sort of direction we want to go is really fascinating.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we have about 1 minute left, so I might go around the panel and see whether you have any very quick final thoughts, starting with you, Simon.
No, from myself, I think all the panelists here have, I suppose, expressed a very clear and accurate sort of view of where things are going. I think there's lots of development in the space from the RegTech technologies that are available. It's only improving, and excited to see what comes. Jackson?
No new thoughts, just big props to the community for building fantastic technologies that really make the space safer for everyone. Thanks.
Todd?
Yeah, look, I think for me, it's just about bringing the community together. And from a community, I mean, the government, law enforcement, I think they're doing a great job in upskilling in this space. The FIs are starting to come on board, and the DC crypto native businesses are coming together. And when we have that holy trinity together, I think this ecosystem is just going to explode, and you know, that new finance system will be here to stay.
Thank you, Louisa.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really interesting journey. Like a lot of these challenges, especially from a legal point of view, are really tricky, and it will take a lot of brain power to sort of nut them out, but I think we'll get there eventually.
Thanks. Keith?
Yeah, so just to really agree with what everyone else is saying, I think we're in a great time in the space now, just really having that dialogue between the different parties. There's a number of great companies out there. Some of the calls today, like Chainalysis and Simon, everyone, it's just, yeah, just having that conversation, having that dialogue, and just having that transparency and making it, you know, it's really just about, as I have done about, and even as I have on about it, working every day, having that great user experience, that customer experience, and not, you know, stifling people too much as well. And that's really what it is, and not having, you know, not regulation for regulation's sake as well. I think it's just every industry is absolutely happy with it, having that regulation. It's great. It's benefit to everybody. We all agree with that. But let's just have that dialogue and have that conversation, and move from there.
Thanks, Keith. Chloe?
Thanks, John.
Yeah, just like thank everyone for all the thoughts. I think they are very helpful. As Exchange, we always see like a lot of problems in the front line. So we're always like open to have this conversation, whether it's with other business, regulators, law enforcement. We're more than happy to share what we have seen, and then like let's have this like a kind of discussions more often, so we can just move forward and find a good plan for all of us and our customers.
Definitely. Thank you. Tung?
Yep, really echoing what everyone has said. I think just cannot overstress the importance of education, of reaching out, of engaging, be it consumers, the financial traditional sector, the regulators, the law enforcement agencies. I think this is a journey that all of us can take together, and then it will be a success for everyone.
Thank you very much. We've gone over time. I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today, and let's continue the conversation. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.